In this lesson, we'll begin refining the creature's anticipation sequence. So now it's time to start cleaning up our work. Again, I'll go ahead and enable AutoKey, and what I'll also do is go ahead and set the default in and out tangent type to auto. Now what's great about auto is that it's going to not only smooth out our interpolation, but it will also give us tangent handles that we can use to adjust our timing and spacing without having to add any extra keys unless we absolutely need to. Alright, great. Next, let's go ahead and select all of our controls. We'll go ahead and right-click and grab the curve editor. Now it looks like we have all keyframes visible, but is that the case? Well, here's how we check. We'd head over to the Show menu, and we'd make sure that underneath Auto Expand we have Animated on. Once we do that, now we'll be able to see every keyframe, including our custom attributes. Whereas before, that was not the case. All right, so now again, we can go to the auxiliary channel here, for example, and we can see all of its keyframes. All right, great. So at this point, what I'd like to do is actually just go ahead and maybe choose that again. So I'll go ahead and turn it off and turn it back on so we can go ahead and select all of those properties because we want to smooth out our animation. Another thing you can check underneath the Show menu is Auto Select, and that should be set to Animated, but let's make sure that is on so we can select those custom attributes along with our position, rotation, and scale if we have any of those keys. Okay, so now we can go ahead and grab all of these and we can choose Set to Auto. Alright, great. Let's go ahead and close this out and start playing the animation back. So this is looking super cool. We have our idea blocked in. Let's go ahead and focus on just this range. We'll hold down Control Alt and we'll drag with our right mouse button until we have brought our last key to frame 100 here. That doesn't mean we won't offset our keyframes, but we'll want to stay within our range. Great. Alright, so to get started here, we can go ahead and grab the global control. And again, starting with this first part of the anticipation, we'll want to have this translate back a bit until the creature should stop moving back. And that happens on about frame 30. So here's what we can do. We can basically go ahead and translate this control back on frame 30. And that will help us make sure we have the placement of the legs just right. Now once we've made that change, we know that our end pose is on frame 50. So we can always just go ahead and hold down Shift and drag the keyframe on 30 to 50. And that's going to clone that key and overwrite what we had on frame 50. Great. So now very important, since we know that 50 is the end of this sequence and the next frame here, 51 would be the start of the next sequence, we'd want to go ahead and lock a pose down on our global control, but we'd want to also make sure that it pops back to the point of origin so that Unity knows how to transition between this change back to the initial position of our main root node. Alright, so here's how we'll do that. This keyframe we have on 60, let's go ahead and slide that over to 51. Alright, sweet. Now at this point, let's go ahead and select all of our control objects, and we'll basically want to kind of lock this information down. So on frame 50, again, we can go ahead and create a key. We should already have one, but let's just be on the safe side and lock all of our poses down. We most certainly need to do that on 51 where the global control pops back, because remember, we locked down a pose on 60, but we now need to do that on 51. Alright, sweet. So once that has been locked down, we can basically go ahead and start to clean this up a bit more. Alright, so let's go ahead and start to kind of fine-tune things. We can start with the creature's arms. Just taking a look at our timing, we know that the right arm should plant much sooner than the left. Remember, the left is dragging behind just a bit. So we can go ahead and take this pose now on frame 10, and we can just kind of drag that back a bit so that the arm plants sooner. Probably want to drag that back just a bit more so that there's weight when it does plant. Great. And now from here, we can go ahead and basically lock down this pose. So I'll go ahead and take this key on frame 4. Let's hold down Shift, and we'll go ahead and drag to create a clone of that key, and we'll drag it just a few frames over to our right so that we have a few frames where that arm is going to remain locked down on the floor. All right, from there we can go ahead and grab the left arm, and we can make sure that on about frame 7 that it plants at that point. So just a little bit sooner so that there's weight. We don't want everything happening at the same time because that would not only break the illusion of weight, but we'd also run into twinning issues. So just as we've done before, where we've made sure that the arm is planted, let's go ahead and hold down Shift, and we'll drag to create a clone of the key on frame 7. We'll just go ahead and add that to frame 10, just a few frames after, as we've done with the right arm. So boom, that plants, the next one plants. And now we can go ahead and work on the right arm again, just making sure that we bring that up at the right moment. So let's say we go ahead and take the pose here that we have on frame 20, and we'll go ahead and basically bring that up to about frame 12. So take a look at the timing here. Looks pretty cool. I'd almost like to go ahead and maybe delay this key just a few more frames so it's not brought too high up. So we'll go ahead and set this to about frame 15. Very nice. And with a change like that, we also want to adjust the clavicle. So what's great is that we already have a pose on frame 10 here. Let's go to frame 15. And since that arm is coming up, we want the clavicle to rotate up. Great. And now, we basically want to make sure that the arm will plant at the right moment. So let's go back to that right arm. Let's make sure it plants a bit sooner than frame 30. We could also have it hold in the air for a bit longer before it actually plants, so it looks like he's really stomping on the floor as he pushes himself back. So let's take this pose on 30, and we'll bring that to about 25. Again, using the right arm control. Great. Now on about frame 22, we'll go ahead and lift up that arm just a bit more so that by the time it comes down, it's going to be a hard hit. Great, I'll go back to frame 22 here and just kind of drop that down a bit more so that there's a moving hold when it starts to come down. We'll also want to adjust the clavicle as well. So on frame 25 here, we can go ahead and rotate that down just a bit. And then when he moves into his down position, we could start to have the clavicle rotate up on frame 30. And then we should have it rotate up a bit higher when we get to the lowest point of the animation. So that looks cool. All right, let's go ahead and clean up the right arm a bit more. So we need to make sure it looks like a push-off. So after frame 7, we'll go, let's say, to about frame 10, and we'll translate that arm forward a bit more, and we'll also rotate the wrist up, again, so it looks like he's pushing off. Great. All right, so from here we can go ahead and kind of do the same thing with the left arm. And we'll have the timing here delayed a bit. So instead of having that plant on frame 25, we can have that plant maybe a few frames after on about frame 27. We'll grab that key on 30 and we'll drag that over to 27. Now, let's go ahead and head over to about frame 13 and we can animate a push off here where we go ahead and translate that arm forward and rotate the wrist up. Keep in mind that things look a little bit blocky at this point, but we're starting to kind of roughen our idea a bit more. All right, great. Let's go ahead and add a hold now. So what I'd like to do is go to about frame 24, maybe lift up this arm just a bit higher so that when we finally plant, it's a harder hit. All right, sweet. Now, as he starts to lift himself off the floor, we want to offset the timing here definitely. So what I like to do is head over to the frame where they're both planted, and we'll go ahead and delay this key on 40. Let's go ahead and hold down Shift, and we'll start to clone to create a copy. And what that's going to do is make sure that the arms are planted for a much longer time before they actually lift up. So we could always take this key and bring it to about frame 45. And then we could start to offset the arms a bit more. So I might go ahead and grab the, let's say the left arm, since that's coming up a bit higher, we might as well have that start coming up first. So we'll go ahead and take this key on frame 45 and let's go ahead and drag it to about 43. So that'll lift up and then the next arm will follow. Cool. Now to kind of finish up this lesson, we can go ahead and work on animating the clavicles a bit. You can see that the arms are locking up. It's because there's no rotation here on the clavicles to make sure that we correct this pose. So let's go ahead and make sure we do that. As the creature's starting to move up, on about frame 46, we can go ahead and rotate that right clavicle down. Great. And we'll do so in a way where the arm kind of looks a bit locked, but we know that it's not locked because we'd run into IK locking. So I might just go ahead and rotate it down just a bit more on 46. Great. Let's go ahead and take a look at the opposite arm. And here, since it plants for a bit, we'll go to that plant frame on 43 and rotate it down. There we go. All right, cool stuff. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we've worked on in this lesson. Let's go ahead and play this back and see the animation is really starting to come together. We've just kind of thrown in our ideas a bit. This looks great. Yes, there are a few issues, of course, but we'll get those fixed in no time at all. It's one step at a time. All right, so let's say we stop the lesson here, and we'll continue our refinement pass in the next lesson.